All right, everyone. As I mentioned, for those of you who just walked in, I'll be recording the lectures and placing them on YouTube with Integrity after class. All right. Comes in handy because I know life happens. Sometimes people get sick. The weather is going to change really soon, as we get a glimpse of it over the last couple of days, so forth and so on. And it comes in handy as we move along, especially when you're preparing for the test, so forth and so on. All right. Last week, when we ended the class, I know many of you, most of you, turned in your homework assignments today. That's great, and I appreciate that. I did not mention the homework at the end of class last week, even though it was on the syllabus. So, this is the one and only time where it was not a requirement to turn in today. But for those of you who did not turn in your homework today, make sure you get it to me by next class. Okay? For those who don't know about it, go to your syllabus. That's the first homework assignment. It's worth 10 points. Okay? For those of you who turned in your homework in today, I will grade it and give it back to you next week. Yes?
How long was this first week?
I did not put a specific page requirement, but I guess, I would assume, for the questions that were asked, about 1 page. He indicated brief. Some of you like to talk. I understand that. All right? There was no, I put no requirement there. All right? As we move forward, I will put page requirements. All right? And a lot of times, I don't, my goal is not to make you continue to pull stuff up and put as much as you can on paper. My goal is for you to be efficient writers, effective writers. Every word, every sentence should have meaning. Reason being, in the public sector and the executive world, people don't have time to just read to read. There are reports after reports after reports. Your job as an analyst is to take all this information that's out there, synthesize it, and say, what's the big picture here? How does it relate? How can we address these macro challenges outside the organization or within the organization? All right? And develop effective policies and procedures to address whatever challenge it is. A lot of times, senior executives, decision makers, whether it's city council, elected officials, they don't have time to read the report. That's your job. That's why you get paid the big bucks. All right? How about the readings? How were they? They were good. They were fun. Interesting. Yeah, tell me something interesting.
How they made Egypt,
Okay. Okay, again, a historical perspective, right? All right, go ahead.
We still can't define what public administration is.
You can't put your hand around it, right? All right, good.
I like the part about Alexander the Tocqueville because when I was here as an undergrad, there was a teacher who belonged to the Tocquevillian Society, he was the head of it in the School of Arts and Science, and I took his class as an elective, and Alexander de Tocqueville wrote this book about libertarian government, and it was about 2,000 pages long, right? But that's all he talked about was the libertarian, what he thought should be the focus of our government being liberal, but not liberal in the sense that we use now. His definition of libertarian was more heavy government and not so much people, but that it was mentioned in these articles, I found that very interesting.
Very interesting, right? De Tocqueville. He was a French citizen. He came to the United States, studied this democracy, the only democracy that existed at the time.
That's the name of the book, Democracy in America.
Yes. What else? All right. Good.
I found it interesting how the dynasties began to evolve, where the pharaohs started to slowly but surely lose a lot of the power they had, and it was broken up into subdivisions of other governments.
An administrative state, all right? They need to find a way to organize, to administrate this complex society that lasted for thousands of years, all right? What else? What we'll do today is two parts to this lecture. The first part, we're going to go over some of these ancient civilizations and try to get a handle on just the age of this field of public administration. What it is to set up an administrative state, to have an apparatus whose job is to take care and manage the core functions of governance. Because without that, you cannot have a complex society. Then as we move forward through the lecture, we're going to talk about the different traditions and dynamics that shaped American public administration. Because American public administration started 100 years after this country was founded. It's a long time to be operating without a strong central government. And some of these contradictions in American governance, they still shape the parameters in which administrators today operate. Then we'll move more into modern governance, challenges of governance during the next lecture. But what I want you to really start to see is that American public administration is not, how should I say, it's not a mathematical equation. There are a lot of contradictions. Things were built up upon one another. Ideas were gathered from different places and they built upon one another over time. That's why sometimes it's hard to grasp. And there's an art to it. There's an art to first understanding it. What is this thing of public administration? And then an art to working within the parameters to make you much more effective as administrators. There's a lady here painting the coast. When you paint something, you see it, you see a physical manifestation, and then you draw it as you see it. And that drawing will never be like the original physical manifestation, but it'll be something similar. But in that, you're going to have your own vision, your own thoughts. You can shape it in a way. All right? Now this is still abstract, and as we move along, you'll get more and more specific. All right? Administration is an ancient profession. I want you to know that. Public administration, in American context, started in 1887. But this is a field that's been around for thousands of years. People have been sitting in schools, training to run government agencies for thousands of years. It's not easy. Ancient Egypt, civilization that lasted for 3,000 years, 4,000 years, thousands of years ago. Very complex and complicated society. The Pharaoh was appointed by the gods to rule. However, the Pharaoh needed professional help to rule, to run the country, because things got complicated. There was a position called the Vizier, who worked right up under the Pharaoh. He was the administrator appointed by the Pharaoh to run the day-to-day affairs of the government. Things such as land surveys. Who owns the property? The treasury. Who prints the money? Building projects. Massive building projects. Levees, water dikes for farming. The pyramids, Great Pyramids, that still stand today, which were some of the tallest buildings in the world until the early 1900s. The legal system, the courts, the police. These are services that are provided because without them, society could not function. With that, the nation, ancient Egypt, was also divided into 42 administrative units because the territory was large and needed people with specialized administrative skills to manage the sub-areas. Each area was called a nome. And each nome was governed by a nomarch. They all reported to the Bishop. Does this sound like anything familiar?
Yeah.
Like what?
United States government.
President and
President.
Senator,
President.
governor.
We start to get ideas. The United States, right? If you travel around the world, different countries are also broken down into regions, right? It's not a new idea. It's not a new concept. It's a way of organization, right? At some point, if you're governing a large territory, things get complicated. Somebody has to be responsible for it, all right? Ancient China, Han Dynasty. Lasted about 400 years. 202 BC, 220 AD. This was the first, how should I say, governing system where records are kept. Administrators were hired based upon merit. It wasn't who you know, it's what you know. So you had to take a test to get into the civil service. All positions had a set salary scale. Meaning that if you get this position, you know what your salary is now, and you know what it will be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if it was a lifetime appointment. Traits of this can also be seen in our modern day civil service. Officials were also evaluated on their competence. But in that evaluation was also their honesty. Were they honest? Are they known as being corrupt? Did they obey their own laws? Or the laws that are set by the emperor? Adherence to the law. Treatment of convicts. Why would that be so important? I mean, even 2,000 years ago, having administrators that are honest. What's the impact?
Keep the integrity of the government.
The integrity of the government.
And also teach them around trying to organize their own armies and possibly overthrow the government.
Revolting, right? Did you have something? Okay, yeah. Yes.
To build trust within the government or?
To build trust, right? Can't trust the government officials. You can trust. That also impacts stability, right? There was a sign of nepotism, corruption. It impacted their evaluation. It impacted their ability to move up. This Han Dynasty is the first trait in a governing system, whereas hiring is completely based upon merit. There was set salaries there. All right? This is 2,000 years ago. Yes?
Would that be the kind of the beginning of a civil service kind of exam that we have?
Yes. It's the derivation is the first.
Yeah.
That's set. That's completely documented. Right? Yeah. Open the windows and. I know it's close. I don't know what else we can do.
No, that's fine.
Roman Empire. It's the first and widest empire that we know of. Started Western civilization. The Greeks were first for an empire that spread. Rome, ancient Rome. Latin languages. You go all throughout the Mediterranean or Europe, you see traces of this civilization. '27 BC, 476 AD, that's 500, 600 years. When they first started, the Senate was the governing body, but they quickly lost power to the emperor. This emperor controlled the military. Emperor had final say in all legislation. So the Senate still existed, but in the end, the emperor didn't like it. He vetoed. Say no. Why? Because he had the power. For the most part, the government, there was a central government, military, and provincial governments. Provincial governments were in charge of all the territories that were occupied, colonized, or brought under Roman control. For the most part, as the Roman Empire expanded, they would take control through war. After war, they would implement their laws. And then taxation. Part of the law was taxation. Part of that taxation was revenue, but also grain to feed the military as they continued to expand. In exchange, with taxes and quote-unquote peace, they would build roads. They would build bridges, aqueducts to bring water from far places. The Romans built the most sophisticated, at their point in time, for thousands of years, built the most sophisticated network of aqueducts into Rome and major cities of the Roman Empire. They still sit today. They built marketplaces, amphitheaters, and a lot of construction projects that are still functioning today, 2,000 years ago. For example, this bridge is in Spain. It was built 2,000 years ago. In it, there's a stamp by the emperor. It says, "This bridge will last forever." It will last forever. Now, over the centuries, there's been wars. And different militaries have tried to blow up the bridge. It still stands today. I would ask you, is there anything that we build today that may be here 2,000 years from now? Do we know? Do we build to last?
No.
The railroads.
Yes.
I want to say yes. Like, not the dam at Niagara Falls, Hoover Dam, the Mount Rushmore. They've already, those things have already lasted 1,000 years. Why not assume they will last 1,000 more?
The Hoover Dam,
Well, maybe not the Hoover Dam, but
built in 1920s and 1930s, right? For electricity, electrification. that may be here for quite some time, right? Mount Rushmore, it's a mountain, all right? Carved it. What about our cities? What about our bridges? What about our infrastructure? Our buildings? Philosophy. All right? In the eastern United States, things are a lot older than they are in the western United States. For the most part, things in the western United States, after 50 years, they clear it and they rebuild. We rebuild our cities. Rome, the Colosseum, built over 2,000 years ago. Entertained people. Blood, death. 50 to 80,000 people would go every weekend. They would see the show, the spectacle. Where you sat in the Colosseum was based upon your social economic status. You were wealthy, you got a front row seat. You weren't so wealthy, you still got in, but you're far up there. All right? Does that remind you of anything today? Football, baseball, basketball, all right? Theaters. Colosseum was important, just like football is really important. All right? There's something about human civilizations and society. We like sporting events, a show of some sort. All right? Some things have changed. Some things have not changed very much. But it was important for the government or the emperor to finance that. Also, in Rome, it was very interesting. It was very interesting. When you walk around Rome, you'll be astonished at how many Egyptian obelisks, the tall towers that they have. They were taken from Egypt about 2,000 years ago. They sit up around the city. I think there's one in Central Park. It's big, but some of these are really big. You know. Societies learn from other societies. Rome took a lot and learned a lot from Greece, but Greece was not as large as ancient Egypt. They had to go there, learn. Just like a lot of societies today go to ancient Rome and learn. Just like the United States, when it was developing as a country, went to a lot of other places and learned about governance. It's like today, we're going to go back in our own history, but we're also going to study the history of other places to learn about governance. The British Empire. The height, 1920s. Say the sun never set on Britain. The empire lasted for hundreds of years. At that point, it's the greatest the world's ever seen. $350, 400 years. In 1922, height of the empire held sway over 458 million people. 20% of the global population at the time. Covered approximately 25% of the Earth's landmass. The sun never set on Britain. Now, you could be asking, Dr. Oliver, why are you going over all this right now? Their political, legal, and linguistic legacy lives on. I'm speaking to you in what language? English. You're speaking to me in English. Little Rock, north of Europe, has an influence. had a profound influence. My ancestors didn't come from England. Many of your ancestors didn't come from England, but we're speaking English, not just here, but everywhere around the world. Also, the United States was a colony of England. Well, 13 colonies of England. The legal system, the governing system is heavily influenced by the British legal system. And some of the quirkiness of our system of governance is response to some of the governing mechanisms that were in effect and are in effect still in present-day England. Any questions? The way the colony worked, spread your influence, just like the Romans, conquer the military. You apply your laws, tax the people. And generally, you profit. The British Empire, especially the Caribbean, slaves, sugar, profits. India, extraction of raw materials, selling it back, clothes back to India. Southeast Asia, spices, so forth and so on. Hong Kong, similar. Seventeen 1776, down in the country, but between 1775 and 1783, you had the American Revolution. Like I said before, 13 colonies, 13 states, the original states here were colonies of England at one time. And the American Revolution, for the most part, was not conceived of by poor peasant class of people. These were wealthy landowners, educated people. But they had a lot of gripes and problems with the way the colonies were being governed. Declaration of Independence, it specifically mentions a couple, well, more than a couple, but a couple of things here. Obstruction of the administration of justice. These are gripes against the king, King George. He has erected a multitude of new offices, kept standing armies in times of peace, and established an arbitrary government. Now, these words, on one hand, you just look at them, they're kind of abstract. What are they talking about? What they're getting at is a discontent with the governing system of the day. They felt that it wasn't working for them. So it caused rebellion. That rebellion ultimately led to a new country. Defeat of the strongest military power that ever existed at that point in history. In fact, being back east, in New Rochelle, Boston Road, George Washington, at one point, went down Boston Post Road. It was true. One of the main things to grasp from all this is that the framers of the American Constitution were rebelling against the administrative state that was set up in the colonies by the British. What is that administrative state? Courts, police, taxation. It's not having a say in the day-to-day affairs of how government is run. And those dynamics impacted the way the American Constitution was set up. And lo and behold, the reason why I'm speaking about it now is it impacts our governing system today. Any questions? What I want to do, I'm going to play you about 20 minutes of the video. Because it's hard, especially now, in an urban area like New York, or really around the country, to really grasp what the country was like during its founding, first 100 years. It was rural. Wasn't so sophisticated. Wasn't so educated. But there's a lot of opportunity because it's a new place. All right? What I want you to do is take notes of some of the things that you see in the development of a town. All right?
dysentery, the spotted fever, the cholera, and the ague. Not to mention them other maladies, contracted in a consort with low women. Ha-ha. Always to come to here digging in the dirt and find the dirt like I do doing. Oh, come on here. You want to be next? I've seen how he survived all of that. He could have been hit by two, fallen down a shaft, starved, just murdered, or committed suicide on Christmas Eve. What I'm trying to say, God, is you don't seem to have no particular pity for your children when they live. So that's why we're asking to be a little kinder to them when they get. So don't do rivers, Lord. We pass out of you. This one touches body and soul. To take them, or to keep them, I stake this claim for me, my new partner over there, whatever the hell his name is. Forever and ever. Amen. Hold them up. Sure, you'll get to it and all. a man if I ain't shot at record. I never did pass my mother's father, let alone respect him around me. And I've covered my neighbor's life. Whenever I had a neighbor. Whenever he had a wife. And I generally cheated car. But there was one thing I could not do. I ain't never dealt with mine. For one sacred thing, even a little stuff like this. Anyway, go to the ball. And Tom's gonna pour your share. And Bart, I'll swap up anytime you start.
Well, I meant no offense, Mr. Huntington. I appreciate you saving my life, Tom.
But you just want to know what's expected of you in return.
That's right. I like to know what crops I'm running.
Well, when I get dead drunk, falling on the street, I expect you to come get me. Because I don't want to die money drunk. If I owe a man $100, I expect you to stand good for me. And if I get melancholy, which can happen, I expect you to be my companion and to solace me.
What happens when you get in a fight?
Well, before anything can happen one time, you might want to this. I'm glad I can pretty well take care of myself. See, I don't fight back.
I don't fight at all unless I have to be happy. I got kind of a temper. Once I start, I just can't quit. So,
Just remember that I'm a war son. Well, I hear shopkeepers pulling a town with wagons. What do you say? I hope you up that road. You go down there, get by.
I ain't a booze man either, Mr. Hudson.
Well, I am. I'm reading tonight, Sam. Hey, Mr. Corey, this is my brother. I thought you were on your way back to Iowa. Well, I was just passing through here. Right on the way, you know. How's it going, Willie? I ain't won a hand in 3 weeks, man. This is my party. Calls itself Rock Club, Willie, but that's what the other side. Good to see him with 5 days in another place.
Oh, I don't gamble with you, know.
Neither does he. I understand what this is about. I'll buy a whiskey for any man that stands up. Hey, I was sitting there. I just down there. Give him a whiskey.
Very good. You have an outstanding account to the amount of $68 from Yuba City, and which you 6 pounds.
You're bad on you. I was brought on. Don't you remember, girl?
I want to get paid now, before they run you out of debt.
Put that damn gun down and stand before the whiskey I said. And dry your hands before you wait. GP and my body needs some supply. Pound of sugar, a half a case of whiskey. And a case of pneumonia for Sherman bar there.
Pound of sugar and a round sack of flour, please. Evening. Horace Tabor, Worcester, Massachusetts.
What did you get?
Arrived this morning. It rained this afternoon. I aim to be back in Worcester by Christmas. It says here, California is going to be a citizen's union. Just what it needs. Law and order. That's good news.
So it ain't the me. It's for my unrelenting knowledge to fuck out any territory today if I'm on the state. And head, we're gonna rule.
I don't agree, sir.
Well, I don't want to hear about it. All I know is you look around the human race. You gotta wonder what the hell God was thinking about. God made the mountains. God made the sky. God made the people. God knows why. He fixed up the planet as best as he could. Then in come the people and gum it up good. The first thing you know, they civilize the foothills and everywhere eat foothills. first thing you know, they civilize what's pretty by putting up a city where nothing that's pretty can grow. They muddy up the winter and civilize it into a place to uncivilize even for snow. The first thing you know, they civilize left, they civilize right, till nothing is left, till nothing is right. They civilize freedom till no one is free, no one except, by coincidence, me. The first thing you know, the boozer's in prison and the criminal he isn't, and only the rascals have dough. When I see a parson, I gotta put my arse in the wagon that follows the tail of a crow. The first thing you know, I picked up and blow. The first thing you know.
Ben Robson! Ben! You bloody old rumpot!
Well, it's my part.
I heard you in this town. Wait till I tell you what happened to Harry and Ernest and me. What? We never went home. Come on, lad. We're having a dance. Jump in. Hey, climb on. We're going right there.
Anybody seen Ben Robson?
He left here about 20 minutes ago. Hey, are you his partner? Yeah. He owes me $80. He said you were damn good.
west side.
Yeah? I speak it for you. I guess this is what you meant when you said you expected me to come get you while you're drunk in the street.
And now you can see my confession, see my moment for this,
Or my partner is.
I like you, Mark.
I like you, good.
All right, y'all watch the rest of it. It's on the presentation. Good movie, huh? What I wanted you, it's a caricature. It's also a Western movie, but it's a Western United States. But we can talk about the development of the area. Why did the people settle there?
Gold.
Gold. Right?
Not just that, they went west because there was more land available that, you know, the East Coast was populated because of the 13 states. So people started going west because the government would tell them if they would go and forge that land, they could have that.
Yeah. People give them free land, right? The reason why they stopped there is gold. Now the thing about gold is interesting. Wherever it is, people go. They collect it. It's very valuable. But for utility, what can gold really be used for besides storage or value? What's it used for? Huh?
Trade or barter?
Trade and barter, yeah, for trade, for money, right? That's money. But it does have a practical use.
Yeah, it's just in electronics.
Use electronics, right? Because the best conductor of electricity. That, I think it's Cadillac converters on the vehicle. It's not that useful out of all the elements, right? But it's valuable. So what happened? We found gold or what?
They settled.
Stayed. Settled, right? When they settle, what do they need?
Regulation.
Manpower.
What do they need? What do they do?
They start building, starting to develop their city or whatever, their development, building.
Housing, right? Water, harnessing water.
Economy.
They need food, right? They put up a sign. What was it?
No name city.
No name city, population man, right? The store owner, right? They saw the guy who walked up in there and said, I recognize you from another town, right? Put a gun on. Pay me right now. And you can get whiskey, right? So people made money in that way, right? Gambling's a big thing, right? The guy said, I don't gamble. What do you say the other guy does?
You don't do that.
You don't gamble either, right? What about the partnership that developed? One with looked after the other. But at first the guy was skeptical. He was like, look, you're doing all the work, and I'm supposed to just get this go for free? What's expected of me? What did he sell? What did he say? Protection?
Companionship.
Friendship? And how does that play out? If I owe a debit, pay it on the spot. If you ever find me drunk in the mud, pick me up. That was the agreement. It wasn't that sophisticated. Alright? He sung a song where they're drinking whiskey. It was kind of, some of you may have been hard to hear. What was he talking about?
God creating and people, civilization.
It's talking about
Control, social control. You build something with no civilization, then it becomes problems. Then it becomes laws, and because freedom being taken away, it becomes this, and that, different laws and in place, so you start building civilization.
So Merlin said God built the mountains, the oceans. Is that what he was saying? Right? And then he started saying man built cities, the laws, and civilization. And then what?
It turns out to be, it's built one way, but it turns out another way. Like it may
What's
be,
built one way?
like the government or society itself may be designed one way, but it turns out to be corrupt in the end. Not corrupt, but things don't go.
The change
Well, I
is we
guess
alter.
What is building? What is society? What is the purpose?
The purpose is to maintain order and equality. That's what I assume.
Order, well, housing,
Right.
right? Building a more sophisticated society, but in that you need social controls, right?
Yeah.
Then you go. Yeah, do you understand it, Philip?
Pretty much like evolution. So, make it possible.
Evolution? What kind of evolution? City evolution? Urban evolution? Biological. I'm just messing with you. There's an evolution in here, but it's talking about the thinking, the mentality, right? On one hand, it's saying God created the earth, right? Nature, mountains, stars, streams, the land. At the same time, man creates the cities. But in order to create cities, you have to have regulations, right? But you see, they're also building their own city.
They control the law.
Well, they're building their own city, and they need certain things to be able to survive. Yet at the same time, there's a distrust of the laws that are needed, or distrust of power. What were they doing at the end? They were dancing. They were having a party, right? What were they celebrating? Nothing. Another day. What was the sheriff telling them to do? Did they listen?
No.
Why not? Because they didn't have to. Can you even imagine that?
No.
Chaos. In our minds, right? Especially in America, every aspect of life is regulated. Birth, life, death. There's a policing agent at every corner. Every phone call is monitored. Everything you look up on the internet. Can we even imagine being, quote unquote, free? Can you?
I can't imagine.
Clever.
Never been.
Freedom of doing what, where, and when.
Elaborate. It's interesting, yeah.
that in the case of the movie, they had the freedom to do whatever they wanted, when they wanted, how they wanted, without any regulations, without apparently hurting anybody. Right now, getting that into the actual times, the term freedom is subjected to what we do behind closed doors to ourselves. If it's involved, our actions involve somebody else, it's not freedom anymore.
Could involve somebody, right? Anybody else?
I don't feel it's too much. We tagged and everything we do from driving, you got cameras, you got this, you got trackers on the phone, you have, even with you on the phone, on the internet, everything. I don't feel like that's a sense of freedom. I mean, you even tag in what you say when the amendment tells us that we freedom of speech, you can't even really speak what you really feel without being scrutinized behind it. So I've seen a lot, when you look at the media and you watch TV or certain people's lives, and even, just not even people with money lives, just normal people, us. People have been destroyed behind things being blown out of proportion. So it's not, that's my personal opinion, I don't feel free in that sense.
Well, a lot of our freedom is what we choose to put out there. We choose to have a phone, we choose to go on the internet, we choose to post these things, and, there's a lot of choices being made, and our freedom being messed with because we choose to put ourselves out there. I mean, we're free to wear a red shirt and walk everywhere. I agree with that. We want to wear a shirt. I mean, they may, but
These things become a necessity though. To even work and function, these things become a necessity.
I just don't feel, I just want to say this, and I'll apologize. That's still a statement of a limitation of freedom. I mean, we are not free to do, we're not really free to do a lot of this.
Yeah, for the most part, it's this. The more conflict I can feel, everyone has a thought about this, right?
Yeah.
That's everyone's life. But this is the thing. The more complicated and complex your society is, the more rules and regulations that are developed to accommodate, to actually make that society function. All right? The easiest and most prevalent example, especially in New York City, is parking. The amount of tickets that people get, and the difficulty it is of reading the signs. Can you park here or can you not park here? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. At some point, if there's no signage, people's driveways get blocked. You can't access private property, or they can't, from their private property, access the street. People are parked in the middle of the streets. You still see that today. I just can't stop and go run into the store if there's no parking, right? It messes up the traffic flow. Then it goes on and on and on, right? But one of the things I want you to really sink in and take from this, when this country started, for the most part, it wasn't sophisticated and metropolitan like it is now. It was rural. Most of the United States, at this juncture, 60% lives in the suburbs. So most of the United States is suburban. But most of the United States land area is still unoccupied. People only live on about 12% of the land in the United States. Did you know that? This is still predominantly a rural nation. It's a beautiful nation. It's very large. Some of the most magnificent landscapes. But when a lot of the real thinking and development of the Constitution that we have and the laws and the public institutions were developed, this is predominantly a rural country. And in that, especially in urban areas, there's contradictions. What I'm going to do now is go over a couple of key terms that serves building blocks. All right? Republicanism. This concept derived or developed during the early stages of the Roman Empire, when the Senate still made laws and did not necessarily need the tacit emperor's approval, when there was a quote-unquote democracy in Rome. This idea was buried for about 1,600 years. It's a long time. It's hard to fathom. Because after this experiment in democracy in Rome for a small window of time, and they got this idea of democracy from the first democracy in ancient Athens, for 1,600 years, that idea, it went below the surface. You want to know why? People don't get power away for free. Kings, rule, the emperors said, look, I have the military. Why should I share my ideas with them? I'm running the country, all right? In the 17th century, this was revived as a countercultural idea. Because during the 17th century, kings ruled, kings and queens ruled all of Europe, all around the world. Democracy was a countercultural idea that was picked up by intellectual elites. But the thing is, as we talked about, in the 13 colonies, this was ripe ground for this type of idea to spread. Why? Because people had a problem with the king. It wasn't necessarily just the king, it was the governance of the 13 colonies. Obstruction of justice, undue military presence in time of peace, overtaxation, so forth and so on. And the idea, the thinking was that whenever you have a king in charge, that's what they're going to do. Because they're the only ruler. They don't have to agree with or negotiate with anyone. But if you have a democracy, the people of these 13 colonies can come together and work out something, a way of life that would be better for the people in this country, or better for them, because they were wealthy landowners. But also, the British administration of the 13 colonies, just like the military power at that point was the greatest, their administration was trained to carry out whatever laws were written with efficient fashion. Very efficient. And one of the things that the founders of the Constitution, framers of the Constitution, did not want or did not think of and left absent from the Constitution is an administrative state, an efficient government. It's not like they didn't know about it. They didn't know the necessity. It's not like they didn't know about the necessity of it. It's not like it wasn't standing right in their face. But they left it out. Because they didn't want another king developing in the Americas. Because again, whoever takes control has power over the military. They're the king. Right? At that point in time, that was the way of governance. This concept of Tudor tradition and federalism. Tudor tradition sees law as divinely inspired. God makes the law, and man can only find that law. There is a higher power than man. Laws make the ruler. And the ruler does not make law. The ruler only enforces the law. This law is divinely inspired. And there's a lot of threads of that in our country, or this classroom, in our country today. And a lot of places you go, people don't feel that way. Federalism, the idea of federalism. Country first started as Articles of Confederation. All 13 colonies were given equal status and equal power. In order for a law to be passed for all 13 colonies had to agree. There was no chief executive, meaning there was no president, no one person in charge of getting things done for a central government. The problem is that if you put 13 of you in a room, are you going to agree on everything? No. Put 13 family members in a room, they're going to agree on anything. Nothing was getting done. The most basic of governmental tasks were not getting done. However, power had to be dispersed because that was the only way to get the colonies to agree on forming a government. So this concept of a central government, state governments, power being dispersed between governmental units derives from this. It's a negotiation. And that negotiation was necessary for the founding of the country. Without that negotiation, those 13 colonies would not come together.
Question.
Yes.
Wouldn't that make it more difficult once you start to expand? If they put you in with the 13 colonies, and you start adding to that, where they lie, wouldn't it make it more difficult?
Yes, difficult now, right? However, without an agreement, was one colony going to give absolute power to another colony? No. So they had to sit down at the table and work something out. It's a negotiation. It's an agreement. You got to understand, at this point in time, democracy was a radical experiment. It had not been tried for 1,600 years. It's a long time. Think about it. People had to go to the libraries for this one, right? They had to pick up old books. They had to really study. How did this happen? How does this work? Because 1,600 years, kings or queens have been ruling. And that's the way it always had been. But there's this one little sliver in history that says, okay, this concept of democracy. Right? I mean, the people have a say in what goes on. They get to vote. The concept of counteracting selfish ambition. It's a Judeo-Christian country. Christianity is a major religion. All different strands of Christianity. In this view, Judeo-Christian view, all mankind is involved in sin. Because sin derives from Garden of Eden, Adam biting the apple, then you have sin. Some people tell the story better than I do. But the underlying lesson here is that man and woman have a really unsolvable or Irrevocable, no word, right? Unsolvable tendency to sin. They have selfish ambitions, selfish desires. Impulses can never be fully overcome. That's the nature of man, selfishness. That's your philosophy. You understand that's the nature of man. You understand anyone that you come in contact with is also going to be selfish, even if they want to overcome that. Have to devise some type of governing system where selfish ambition can counteract selfish ambition. It's hard to conceive of, especially if it doesn't already exist. Our government is set up in a way that no one branch supersedes the other. Individuals are forced to compete with one another even when they're in power, to get into power, and even when you're in power. And even when you're in power, no one individual has power to change everything. You have to have a majority. In some cases, you can't just have a majority, you have to have a supermajority. It's a way to funnel and channel selfish ambition. Solve the goal, solve the challenge. Any questions? Contradictions. There are a whole host of contradictions in American governance. The reason why I point out these contradictions is because knowing them or being cognizant of them makes you a lot more effective as an administrator. The best leaders can hold two opposing views, understand two opposing views in their mind. They're not forced to sit in one camp or the other. They can understand both sides and make a decision. In a democracy, in American governance, the most effective administrators, politicians, they have to understand that, or they have to be that way. So when you get a majority, I'll go over some of these contradictions. The belief in fundamental law and republicanism. On one hand, for administrative theory, for an administrator, someone who's supposed to carry out the law, your source is legal authority. You're provided power based upon the law. Yet, if law is divinely inspired or created, how can one man or woman be charged with carrying out the law? Does God give them that power? And if God gives them that power, isn't that dangerous? That's when people are willing to commit heinous atrocities. Because they're all powerful. God said they can do it. It's a contradiction. Popular sovereignty. We the people vote. We have complete power over our government. Yet, it doesn't work that way. The people's power is checked, or the power of government is checked at every juncture. It's a bicameral legislature, meaning there's a House, Congress, that's elected, and a Senate. So both of these elected bodies have to vote on something. If they don't agree, it gets sent back. They have to vote on it again. The president has veto power over the laws that our elected representatives write. The president vetoes it, it has to go back, get voted on, supermajority of both houses. presidential elections. There's what they call the Electoral College. Do we know what that is?
Yeah.
Especially after the 2000 election, right?
Yeah.
Al Gore wins a popular vote. President Bush, he gets the Electoral College. He wins. How does that happen?
Exactly. That was stolen. That was a scandal.
He could have stolen it, but he was president. He made it. Either you win or you lose. The Supreme Court, which is another body of power, right? They said he won. So legally he won. Does that make rational sense to the voter?
No, that's that contradictory, governance.
It's contradictory. But also, Electoral College is put there. It's not a direct election of president. Right? It's an independent judiciary. Once they're there for life. There are so many ways, there are so many checks and balances, so many filtrations on the people's power to change things in government, which makes governance slow. Right? It's also a mitigation of this concept of democracy. What I mean by that, at face value, democracy, everybody votes for something, it should be. Right? But it's not that easy. Majority rule versus individual rights. Democracy, if the majority says we should do this, then it should be done. But it doesn't work that way. Minorities, minority groups also have rights. They have not always been enforced, protected. Imperfect union, where the Constitution was written. African Americans, 3/4 counted as 3/4 for tax purposes. But the concept was still there. The concept is still here today. All right? So, if there's a law passed that quote-unquote discriminates against a minority group, if the majority votes on it, there are protections for that minority group. Now, how far will the state actually go to protect the rights of that minority group? It depends on what's going on in society at that point in time. All right? Federal powers and local autonomy. On one hand, you would think the federal government is all powerful. But they're not. They share power between the states. The states have certain functions. They're autonomous governing units that the federal government cannot dissolve the state government. There's not a direct hierarchy there. There's a shared polar relationship. That has a strong impact upon the federal government's ability to enact and enforce certain laws. It also has an impact upon the state's ability to carry out certain laws, to enact certain laws. There's a shared relationship. There's a constant battle. Who's in charge of what? Yes.
So would an example of that be like same-sex marriage? So where the state would pass a law about what would constitute, you know,
Same-sex marriage, right? That's
on
a
the federal level.
good. Same-sex marriage is that's a hot one right now, especially because what's the law? There's a federal law that says people should be treated equal based upon race, religion, sex, gender, so forth and so on. All right? States pass laws saying that it has to be a marriage between a man and a woman. Right? So what happens if one state passes a law that says same-sex couples can be married, another state can say we do not have to adopt or accept that same marriage, right? Sometimes it creates a lot of conundrum, right, for the people. Sometimes people, same-sex couples, they can't see their spouse or the partner when they're about to die. Property, they can't take on property, they can't transfer property. Insurance, children, taxes, all of these functions, right?
So, let me ask you a question. So, if they go to a state that's legalized with same-sex marriage, and they get married in that state, and they go back to the state they are from. So, what laws apply? The state they got married in, or the state that they live in?
The state they live in. So they're not considered married in the state they live in.
That's a conundrum. It's not settled yet, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And the federal government cannot settle that because they don't have power over that. Right? Yes.
The same thing would apply, wouldn't it, to legalize marijuana for medical usage, because it's the federal law that marijuana is illegal, but states can pass a law saying that they will dispense it as a medicine in their state. So there's that same, unsolvable conundrum.
Washington, state of Washington, Colorado. Anyone goes to Colorado, you buy it for an ounce. Big bag of marijuana, pound of marijuana.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, you go to another state, they take you to jail.
But it's also supposed to be on the ballot in New York in November.
You're on the ballot in New York, right? There's a process, all right?
So, if you bought marijuana in the state that is legal now, and you bought it back to the state that's not legal now,
You go to jail. All right? Interstate traffic. And as you go along, there are so many laws that are different between states, but that's the state's domain. In some areas where the federal government, federal laws conflict with state laws. And it gets pretty confusing. There's 50 states. There's one federal government, but also case law, laws that go through the courts. Under the Supreme Court, there are certain jurisdictions that have different laws, that look at different laws differently. It's confusing. There's no one size fits all, not in American governance. Balance of power. Power is dispersed. We talked about that a little bit. Power is dispersed throughout American governance, and it impacts. It makes things confusing. You don't know how to research. You don't know what laws apply. You have a challenge. If you're an administrator, your job is to implement the laws. All right? Change is incorporated within the system, but it's very slow and difficult. Since the original Constitution, there's been 26 amendments, but 16 after the Bill of Rights. To change the Constitution, 2/3 votes, both the House, Senate, and 3/4 of the state legislatures. It's not easy. It's slow. It's purposely built that way. Virtuous citizen, yet always expecting corruption. Most people in the United States, they believe in the good that they can do and that can be done in society. And in some instances, what the government can do. But there's always, no matter what region of the country you go to, suspicion of the government, because there's always suspicion of power. Always suspicion of power. Equality and inequality. On one hand, the Constitution said every man is created equally. On the other hand, from the very beginning, there's not been inequality. Inequality does not exist in the United States. Slavery. Inequality today.
Is there equality today?
No. It has never existed in the country. Yet the principles state that everyone's created equal.
But when they made that principle, they weren't counting people other than white Anglo-Saxon Protestant males.
It's a contradiction. That contradiction is still here today. Everyone gets education. K through 12 education, right? Just not the same education. Everyone gets due process if you go to court. It depends on if you have money or not. If you got a good attorney, somebody's going to spend time on your case. Every aspect of our governance, right? So we have these ignoble principles of equality. Yet in practice, as a nation, we fall short. Does it have to be that way? No, it doesn't. Can we continue to strive to become a more perfect union? Yes. Is there something that says we cannot do it? No. So we can continue to push to try to reach these heights, to become a more perfect union. There's nothing stopping us except for these slow processes. All right? But if we understand that, then we understand at least there's a process. We understand it's intangible. People say, why are things so unequal? Well, there's processes in place. There's rules in place for stability to keep the nation stable. As administrators, the reason why you want to know all this is because every day you are implementing rules, regulations, policies, and procedures, and a lot of times they're contradictory. The laws that you have to enforce, sometimes they're contradictory. But if you understand the contradictions, it makes you see clearer, then you can implement better policies, procedures, rules, regulations. Yin yang, dark light, polar opposites. These are contradictions in every way that they fit together neatly, perfectly, make a strong bond. You need to think of these contradictions in this manner, because that will make you effective. If you cannot take these contradictions and understand them wholeheartedly, this field will be very difficult for you, because these contradictions are here. Because the governing system and the rules of the game are really a compromise. They're based upon compromise. And in democratic society, it's all about compromise. It's all about understanding the other, learning about the other, trying to look into their heart and minds, even if you do not agree, to see what is needed to move forward. And moving forward, to move forward, it's not always easy. Because you have to look into your own heart, your own mind, and say, how far am I willing to go? This is a valley, beautiful valley. Glaciers that are millions of years old create these valleys. They carve through rock, water, hard water. Some of you drinking water now. Drink it. How can it change form and create this. Creates these beautiful valleys. I want you to think of these opposing theories and concepts and create something beautiful in between. All right? Wynton Marsalis is a very famous jazz musician. He talks about jazz, this concept of democracy. He develops the argument that jazz is equivalent to the concept of democracy. And he makes a couple points. Improvisation, the ability to improvise. There's a set structure, but within that structure, within those laws, there's the ability to improvise, to change, to be creative, to come up with new ideas, thoughts, policies, procedures, make different connections that create something. It's not just a replication of what already has occurred, it's something new. So we need to create, and are doing in our society, and we need more people who are able to do that. The only way you can do that is if you understand the parameters. Love that music, huh? Optimism in the face of adversity. Underlying the American story is overcoming adversity. Every group, every level of society, there's always the story. The individual comes, is here, they face some type of challenge. They muster the strength, they dig deep, they overcome that challenge. To overcome that challenge means that you quote unquote made it, however it seemed, however you envision it to be. We see that story constantly occur in our movies, the stories that we tell one another, our hopes and dreams, in our popular culture, so forth and so on. And if someone doesn't have that kind of story, or doesn't tell their story in that way, they're not trusted by any group in our society. White, black, rich, poor, so forth and so on. It's the way that our American thinking shapes itself. And I say that because Americans believe that that's natural. It's not that way in most of the world. Where you're born is where you will stay. That's it. Your mother was this, your father was this, you're going to be that. That's it. It's destiny. The American story isn't framed like that. Americans don't even believe that. You believe that whatever you are, you try hard enough, you can make it. Common beat, yet multiple stories. American story can be told from all walks of life. Rich, poor, black, white, north, south, east, west, urban, rural, so forth and so on. Listen to the stories. Read them together. It's the only way for success.
I like the way you related what happens in a good jazz band with what happens in a good democracy.
I think that that's what the Constitution is. We have a collection of virtuosos who got together and they grappled with problems.
The great contribution the framers of our Constitution made was developing the form of our government. 3 separate branches: the presidency, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, giving each one some powers over the other 2.
And they work through those powers by a delicate way of balancing individual rights, rights of states, what is the central government's role. And in music, we do that all the time. The drummer is like the president, with the loudest instrument.
Is that the president, the drums.
The drums, the
Okay.
president.
What's the bass there? That's pretty loud too.
Judiciary.
Oh, the judicial branch.
There's a great bass player named Milt Hinton.
Keeps them steady.
That's right, he's called the judge.
Oh, good, all right.
He addresses the harmony and the rhythm. And he's
Okay.
in the center of the rhythm section. So he's in the central location. We can understand everything that's going on, has an influence on the ground rhythm and on the harmony. But the piano and the rhythm section would be like the legislator. The piano represents all of the notes, all of the keys.
But can play everything. And you have to listen to each other. I mean, that's the point. When one of you is playing a solo, the others play along, but they listen.
One of the greatest lessons on the bandstand is just that you're forced to listen to everybody else. So it teaches you to be open in your hearing.
Well, now if we can just get members of legislative branches to pay a little more attention to the theory of jazz music, we'll all be better off. You think?
I'm with you.
Okay.
All right. Most people, when you think of government, you're not necessarily thinking of federal government. You see the federal government on TV, but if you want to go to government, the local government is the closest to you. First flush in the morning, water, local government. Turn on the lights. If it's a private Edison, at one point, that was a government entity. Now it's quasi-government. They charge you their private funds, but they have governmental protection. Right? Police officers, street lights, streets. On the daily basis, you're coming in contact with local government multiple times. From local government, you have state government, so forth and so on. This right here is a city hall. It's really how the place where this governance plays out all across the country on a daily basis. It looks simple. People just sitting there talking about issues. But they impact people's lives on a daily basis. They impact each one of your lives. Once you leave here, you're going to go onto a street. You have to drive, take a train, so forth and so on. All right? This is the arena, whether it's a local government, state government, federal government. We sell your ideas. But all these issues that we've talked about today, they're going to come into play in this simple place. Or whatever simple place where government is practiced that you're interested in. All right? As we move along, these little things will become big things because they impact administrative operations, the decisions that administrators make, and that in itself, if you work in the nonprofit world, definitely impacts the nonprofit organizations because they're regulated by some government entity in one way or another. All right, any questions? Next week, we're going to go over Boss Tweed, one of the biggest politicians in New York history. We're going to learn about how the United States was governed during the first 100 years and why we developed this concept of this field of public administration in the United States. Why having a stateless government or administrative-less government wasn't working anymore. All right? That's it for tonight. Have a good evening.
Yes, we're having
Bring it in. Bring it to me.
Are these the books?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
5 staff. Ends in October.
The Boss Street paper is due next week. No, that paper will be due the following week. I will give it out next week because I'll do the lecture. And then the assignment will be provided next week.
I did my paper, and I'm gonna let you know tonight.
That paper is due next week.
You too.
So I've been trying to plan out stuff. That interview bit as my I did it wrong. I'm a little mindful. Actually, I thought it was in there.
You could go over to that,
Are they looking for a job for a mental health professional?
Yeah, they're out with stuff.
I know a few people who also mental health for a year.
So we're not.
Yeah, get my Wi-Fi set up. I had done my homework last week, so This book has been in the library since 1988, and I'm the first person to take it out. Yeah, well, I mean, it looks like a great why did you don't really appreciate the library. I have so many books that every couple of months I have to buy new bookcases because I refuse to get rid of kids. People don't see the value of it. There's nothing like paper and the covers. That transfer.
I go back to how to say.